At Brand Secrets and Strategies, you learn how to save valuable time and money, where you learn strategies to get your products on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for making time for us on a Friday. This whole webinar series. It's for you and it's about you. So, let us know what we can do to help provide or help answer some of your most pressing questions. So today we're going to talk about how to explode sales during a pandemic. And my friend Adam is on. He's got a tremendous wealth of experience, not only in big mainstream CPG, but also in natural and working for a Japanese company. We'll talk about that in a minute. So first of all, I want to thank everyone who's partnering with me. I leaned in after Expo West was canceled and started doing these free webinars. And a lot of companies, a lot of organizations have asked to be a part of this. So I want to thank Plant-Based Solutions, ECRM, Range Me, Promo Mash, Whole Foods Magazine, Phil Limpert, the Supermarket Guru, the Produce Moms, Green Circle Capital, Bricktown Group, Food Business Success, Big Orange Summit, Sales Consulting, that's Adam, C-Suite Network, C-Suite Radio, Social Nature, and Force Brands. And so again, thrilled that you're all here. So my mission, the reason that we're doing this is to make our healthy way of life more accessible by getting your products onto more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, including online. And so with that said, please help us raise the bar and share these resources with any brand or retailer wanting to grow sales. So the question we have for you as you're thinking about what's going on in the world and what's going on with your business is, what keeps you up at night? Let us know, and we will do our best to put together content either on the podcast, a YouTube channel, or on this webinar series. And I'll reach out, and I've got a lot of great relationships in the industry, and I'll bring other experts on as needed. So please let us know, and please share these with anyone else you know. And then so the next two webinars that are coming up, free webinars, this is a weekly thing, is the next one is how to explode brand sales with the right strategic investor. And Stu is a master connector, and more importantly, he's got so many great resources in his Rolodex, et cetera, and he helps brands get funding and get up to the point where they need to be. So you'll definitely want to listen to that. And then after that, I'm going to be talking about how foolproof promotion strategies to confidently grow and scale your brand. One of the things I've been talking a lot about is trade marketing. And in the industry right now, with all the changes, this is the best way I can help you grow and scale. So let me give you a little bit more context. In 2017, $224 billion with a B was spent on promotions, but it only drove 2.4% increase in sales. Staggering, isn't it? So what we're doing is I want to help you find ways to identify what is the most efficient way to promote, what is the most efficient way to scale and grow your brand, rather than just throwing money away at promotions that do literally nothing. And on that note, I've decided that to help you, I'm going to make my Proven Strategies to Maximize Trade Marketing ROI course free. So if you go to my website, there's a button that says courses. And if you type in the code Trade Essentials, you can get that course for free. And it's my gift to you. This is something I was going to announce Monday on the podcast, but I figured, hey, why not share it with you today? And then also to use the free trade promotion ROI calculator to help you identify what are those opportunities for you to grow and scale. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I want to introduce Adam to you. Adam is a friend. I've known him for quite a while, and I'll let him tell you about his background. But what's great about Adam is that he has a really unique perspective that we're going to be talking about today, about how you can leverage his insights and how you can use that to effectively grow and scale your brand. So Adam, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you're at, your new consulting firm, and a little bit about why you started it and so on.
Wonderful. Well, so glad to be here, Dan. I know it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about getting together in this capacity for some time. So really appreciate the opportunity, first of all. So yeah, it's been really a kind of eventful year for myself on top of the whole industry, of course, and made interesting career pivot in terms of leaving a long-term multinational big CPG company with Edo North America, where I was managing sales for a long time, and then really pivoting out to a consulting path. So my new company is called Summit Sales Consulting. I'm doing outsourced sales representation, if you want to call it fractional sales management, and then also advising and more just kind of early stage emerging brand guidance as well. So really can take different forms depending on the need of the brand or the supplier. But it's, I think, very timely right now, given what's happening in the industry, some of the changing investor dynamics and challenges facing emerging brands. So having been on kind of the big CPG side of this, managing a pretty large team and large portfolio of business for a global company. And then also earlier in my career, having started with a startup, I kind of understand both sides and the unique challenges and circumstances that go with each of those dynamics. So it's great to be back. It's wonderful to kind of be looking at this again with a fresh set of eyes in terms of what it means to grow a young brand in this climate and all of the shifting kind of landscape strategies that go along with that. So I think we're all rolling with this day by day, week by week, trying to make the best of what this looks like, and constantly kind of shuffling and reprioritizing where the priorities are. But it's fascinating, I think, and also trying to find the silver linings, the way to be relevant and resonate in the retail landscape right now. So again, a lot of this has been discussed in various capacities in other webinars and podcasts the last few months. My goal today is to really try to give a fresh perspective in terms of, where I think folks who are doing what I do and even myself could be of assistance to brands.
Thank you for sharing that. And on that note, we're going to be better. We're going to be different. There are a lot of people talking about things. And one of the reasons why I do this is this webinar series, all the content I put out there, is because I want to differentiate what we do here as opposed to everyone else. I mean, there's so much value in everything everyone does. But my point is that we want to give you those skills so that you can use those to hit the ground running. And let me frame it this way. So part of this conversation is about how to use as Adam said, a fractional or someone else to help you grow your brand. There are a lot of people in this industry, which I have tremendous respect for, that have done amazing things growing a brand. But let's face it, you can't be an expert in everything. And if you've got someone that has been with you from the beginning and they've learned how to do things over time, that's great. But sometimes bringing in that unique position, that unique mindset, that outside view of the world and all that experience is the best way to accelerate your brand. And that's what we're really focused on. And so my background, I was classically trained in category management by Unilever, Kimberly-Clark, et cetera, worked for Borden. I created the Spins distribution tracker, so I used to work for them. I'm the one who got them to start selling retailer and store level data. Now, the reason why any of that's important is because the big brands go out of their way to train and develop their people. That is some big brands. And that is one of the biggest benefits of working for them. So now take that experience and then make it fit in our world and natural. And what's unique about Adam is kind of a similar path, but yet he's not only got that natural experience at Edo, but he's also got that experience from a multinational corporation, specifically a Japanese corporation. And we were talking about this earlier. One of the things that's great about Japanese companies, if you don't know a lot about them, is that American companies are more focused on the individual. If I could say this, Adam, let me know what you think. Whereas Japanese companies are more focused on the collective or the company or the society or the family or whatever. And the reason that matters is because they're able to muster all their resources, all the strategies around a single idea or thought and execute at a much higher level as a result. So, for example, I talk about on the Turnkey Sales Story Strategies course that if I tell you a story and you tell someone else and they tell someone else and so on, By the time that store comes back around to me, it's unrecognizable. Well, think about the way that your brand message, your brand story is being communicated throughout your entire sales team. Now, compare that with the US format to the Japanese way of doing things, and I think you might see the difference. And this is honestly the Achilles heel of every brand. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a fascinating cultural study, I think, in global business and the way that, different cultural companies go to market, and also the dynamics of what that means for, working as an American in a big Japanese CPG that's then operating in the US as a satellite, kind of a wholly owned subsidiary of the parent company back in Japan, as is the case with Ito-En. So the learnings and kind of I joke, the MBA in international business that I feel like I got 5 times over has been extremely valuable. And I think one of the key takeaways for me running sales there and having a pretty large team underneath me, remote, separate from the Brooklyn headquarter office, is that there's a desire and I think need in some ways to create a culture that's nested within the larger organization that's a little bit different and needs to be able to operate as more of a Western American style sales culture as far as representing the brand to buyers, to brokers at trade shows. But then there's also very much the Japanese side, and you try to take the good and the bad of both and hopefully meld those to, kind of have a perfect partnership. And obviously there are challenges that go with it. There are a lot of, I used to say kind of quote lost in translation type things that are of course endemic to any type of multinational company. But it was a really interesting study, and also how to kind of bridge that divide between being an officer of the company, needing to really represent the sales team to the Japanese side of the company, and then bring some of the positive Japanese side and the talent and the synergies and the production efficiencies and just all of the benefits that we have from the massive scale in Japan and East Asia, and how to really use those as a tool to wield here in the US market. So it's amazing, and it's also just something I think is pretty unique in our industry, the way that landscape looked for Ito-En, and bringing green tea and matcha and a lot of these trends, which when I joined back in 2011, we're still fairly early stage. If you look at the ready to drink iced tea market, I think about 10 years ago it was 90% sweetened teas. That's starting to shift now, of course, with sugar becoming more of kind of public enemy number one, and the consumer awareness of that evolving. So again, we were probably ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. We were also probably the very first company to bring ready to drink matcha to the US market in a major way with the Matcha Love brand. And that was interesting because it's kind of a more functional, I would say, trendy version of green tea. In some ways, it really accelerated the green tea market and gave it a more functional face, which is really critical right now. So a lot of learnings there, a lot of fascinating things that I think for some companies who are just operating in the US, you don't get that understanding of how these international global trends start to infiltrate or trickle into the US market. And certainly the last few years, we're also seeing a lot of these Asian food trends, whether it's condiments like sriracha or meal occasions like, of course, sushi and ramen. But there's a whole movement of how those things are really mainstreaming in the US rather quickly, if you think back about 10 years or so.
Well, and thank you for sharing that, because we are a blended community, blended society. But, getting back to the business side of it, what I think is fascinating is that when you're thinking about your go-to-market strategy, and this is kind of tying into our conversation today, again, I give a lot of credit to the brands that are able to figure this stuff out there on their own. And a lot of the resources out there, people have been asking me about them, over time. They're about, well, here's how someone solved a specific bottleneck. And what we want to do differently here on this platform is help you avoid those bottlenecks to begin with. And so what Adam was talking about, from my perspective, is how do you leverage those strategies, those insights, those learnings, those cultural differences to get a competitive advantage? How do you leverage those skills that he's been taught to really help a brand grow and scale? And so the point of the conversation was today that the best way to grow your brand or to explode your sales is to align yourself with people that can help you do that.
Yeah.
Now, by hiring someone is terribly expensive. And if you figure, when you pick out the taxes and benefits and all that other stuff, that adds up really quick. And then you've got the overhead and you've got all the other stuff that goes with it. Whereas when you hire someone or bring someone into your company that you can leverage as a fractional employee, meaning you're getting that super high level experience at a fraction of the price for part-time, and you can use them when you need to use them. That gives you an opportunity to not only expose your team to those insights, those methodologies, those strategies, but it also helps you as a brand capitalize or get talent. Let's put it that way, get talent that you wouldn't be able to afford any other way. So the cool thing is you kind of get the best of both worlds, a blended mix of experience for a much reduced price over the long run. And then at the same time, as independent consultants, we take care of our own insurance. We have to pay for our own computer. We have to pay for, all that other stuff. You don't have that extra burden. So when you're thinking about that, and when we're talking about how to help a brand grow, what are some of the things that you've seen brands do successfully, or what are some of the things that you've seen in your journey to get to where you're at, where brands have been able to leverage this concept to help them grow and scale and help augment their team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now we're at a bit of a tipping point, perhaps, in that whole strategy, and looking at the conventional model of saying, okay, I'm going to have an internal sales team, then also I'm going to have a broker. And, is the broker going to be regional or is it going to be national? And how big should my internal sales team be versus that external, broker? And do I really need a broker at all? And all these decisions that I think are the conventional way of thinking about scaling out your sales force, and whether that's in-house or outsourced. Right now, I believe that there is a unique opportunity for brands to look at folks who are doing what I'm doing. And, I'm by no means the first one to do this. In no way am I saying this is a absolutely novel concept. This has been around for a long time, and I've got some great mentors who have, guided me in getting to this path. So I think the difference right now is that the ability for, first of all, folks aren't traveling, by and large, things are being done remotely, the buyer meetings, the trade shows, and just the ability to have face-to-face interaction is severely diminished. And, depending on everyone's outlook on this, that seems like that could be the case for the next 6 to 12 months, hopefully on the shorter side of that. Definitely would be my preference. But I think if you're scaling a brand, if you're looking at what's the most efficient route to market, how do you most quickly have an impact in reaching retailers and telling your story and making that resonate, at least to get samples out, to start getting conversations going, knowing there's going to be a lag time and a delay in, getting to shelf with category reviews either being skipped over for this year or being delayed severely in most cases. Using somebody who can do that skill set, outsourcing it, looking at a contracted basis, may just be a much more efficient route to market. And instead of having to do internal training, having to perhaps have someone come in online who's then going to wonder where to start, what's the channel strategy, you can quickly jump in and say, there's a model for this. There's a way that you start to quickly identify where do you want to go geographically, what's the channel strategy, is this omni-channel, is this just going to be direct to consumer now, given the new landscape that we're in? Is it natural specialty? Are you going to go right to the conventional channel? So those things, I think it's by no means just a turnkey solution, but it's closer to that if you're able to identify the goals and objectives quickly. And I think in that case, then you can simply have someone who plugs in for at least a 3 or 6 month increment, even if that's what it takes, to see what this world's going to look like going forward. And it can really prolong and delay having to have that major cash outlay to go ahead and hire your own team. And like you said, Dan, the package that goes with that, as far as expenses and insurance benefits, and really the all-in costs of hiring somebody, is a lot more than just a salary.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think about that. I remember years ago, To hire someone at about $35,000 or something, that costs a company about 50, 55,000, whatever, when all in. And so that's something to think about. But okay, let's back up. And I'm so glad you said brokers. Now, let's be honest. There are good brokers, good doctors, good mechanics, bad mechanics. But brokers, to be efficient, they have to use cookie cutter strategies and that's how they're able to do what they do at effectively. And so when you're buying a broker, you're not buying people that have your same alignment, same passion, et cetera. So let me back up and explain why this matters. When I was, for example, at Kimberly-Clark or Unilever, we had our own sales force, our own direct sales force. And so imagine having people that would go into a store, spend an hour and a half and work on your items, just your items, nothing else. And then they go to the next store. But while they're there, they talk to the store manager and they sell their products and they build those relationships, right?
Yep.
And then you've got people in sales and all those other functions that work directly for that brand. Now, we were trained the same. We were all incented the same. We all got bonuses based upon how we all performed. And we all had the same level of support in terms of the company. Now, that's really expensive. So now imagine that you're going to a broker and now you've got someone that just because of efficiencies, they've got the same hour and a half, but instead of working on your 20, 30, 40 items or whatever, they have to manage 200 to 300 items. So where do you fall in that range? Now, when you go to a category manager or someone in the sales team and you get a deck, you get a generic deck. And I've helped produce a lot of the reports for NSS and different companies like that. But it's not the same. It's the same thing over and over and over. It's the same cookie cutter strategies. Whereas when you hire someone who's an expert in what they do, like for example, with me, you're getting someone. You would typically find me at the VP level of a Kellogg's, someone with my skill set. So you get that level of strategy and that level of insights, but you get it for a fraction of the price, et cetera. And we focus on what you're specifically needing, not generically, here's the way to do this because here's the way to do it with everyone else. When you hire someone like Adam, this isn't a commercial for us. This is just the mindset. Then you're getting someone who's steeped in a lot of experiences that you would not have if you did not have an opportunity to be trained by the big companies. I mean, literally the amount of money they spent training us at Unilever was staggering. Every single month we would go to some distant location and it'd be a 4 or 5 day immersion into some skill, negotiating, selling, what you name it. And so the benefit, the thing we're talking about here is how do you leverage those insights to augment, to grow your team, to enhance your team. And the reason this matters is because a lot of the other brands out there that you probably are competing with are thinking of us as an expense. When the reality is, if we can teach you how to do something at a much higher level, if we can give you strategies or skills that helps you get to where you want to be faster, then that's the benefit. And I'll give you another quick example. I'm working with a company that's in California who just got into distribution, and the distributor got them into a store in Florida, 2 stores in Indiana, and a couple stores in Louisiana. She's in California. So the question is, first of all, how is she going to realistically support that brand? She's not. She doesn't have any way to be there to support those retailers, to help drive those sales, to share her message. And then the other thing, think about the additional cost of getting your product into distribution in those stores, the merchandising, the slotting, and stuff like that. What we do is we help you develop a strategy where we're going to focus on the stores that are going to be the best fit for you and then grow from there, rather than, unfortunately, what a lot of people do because they don't know this business as well, is they're going to get you distribution wherever they can get you distribution without thinking about whether or not it makes sense to your brand, your objective, et cetera. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a classic industry, I think, kind of decision, which is critical for brands. And we've seen so many that have really made mistakes, I think. And it's the lever difference here is going deep and narrow versus going kind of, just wide and shallow, and having that discipline as a brand, the strategy to stick to your guns, even when the retailers who are on the East Coast or the Midwest or outside of your channel focus come knocking. And that happens all the time. Yeah, oftentimes at trade shows, or through distributors, through brokers. Well, hey, I know you're focused on the East Coast, but boy, I really have this Rocky Mountain account that wants your brand, and it seems like a great fit. But all of your staff and all of your resources and your warehouse and everything else is optimized for the Eastern Seaboard. Do you really want to go out to, the Denver market? And those are classic challenges, because you say, well, who are we to say no to new business? That just seems absolutely foolish. And of course the mindset is going to take you there, and I think everyone can relate to that. However, looking at spreading your resources, looking at what are the costs that are going to be incurred to do so, additional staffing, the freight you're going to need to get out there, having different warehouses, the consumer marketing, the awareness, the expectations that those buyers and retailers are going to have local market support, whether it's feet in the street or some type of consumer marketing beyond the trade spend. All of those things need to really be carefully considered. So, right now, the one of the brands I'm working with, the whole focus is, Pacific time zone, West Coast. That's where we have to prove out the concept, and that's really critical. Of course, it would be great to go and consider those other companies, the other retailers out east that we know would be a good fit. They have the right type of shoppers, but it's really important to stay structured and really look at having that disciplined approach, so you can prove out the concept where you can support it in your own backyard, or at least kind of in your own, kind of several state area, and then build that out. And it's an interesting, I think, kind of push-pull between, discipline, patience, and also really wanting to get the product out in the market, but knowing it's got to be done in a sustainable way. And this is a whole kind of thread we could probably chase for another call, but there are a lot of dynamics that go into that in terms of staffing, in terms of what kind of broker you assign, as you were talking about brokers, Dan, and even looking at the right fit. Do you go regional? Do you go national? Do you go kind of channel, silo by channel, to make sure that you're just only applying resources and paying for them in the areas where you're going to focus? So all of these things are kind of proportionate to how the brand wants to grow, and making sure you're not getting ahead of yourself.
And then also, how do you decide whether or not that person is a good fit, et cetera? One of the other things that's kind of cool about hiring us is you can fire us anytime. And the reason why I make that comment is because you're not investing a ton of money into someone that, okay, now what do we do if we can't get them to whatever? Now you kind of dip your toes in this. And, when we're talking about strategies and all those insights, I see that Jennifer of Social Nature's on the call. She's one of the partners on this webinar series. The reason I wanted to mention her is when you're thinking about the resources that you want to apply in this industry, love it or not, I mean, whether it's a good or bad thing, there are a lot of people that are trying to sell or use canned top-line reports. And let's be honest, the same reports that someone uses to sell motor oil is not going to help work with your organic baby food. There are some differences. And in addition to that, the databases themselves have some issues in terms of they're not aligned with the way that customers actually shop. So focusing on that alone, when you've got someone with some expertise who knows how to use the right resources, who knows how to dig into the data and solve those problems and align the data around the customer that shops, or find the extra resources outside of what a lot of brands think about, the best resources, sometimes that's the biggest win. In fact, years ago, people used to tell me that I should just have a business telling people how to get the best kind of data that they need to grow and scale their brand. Very complicated topic. We'll cover that a lot of the podcasts. But for example, Social Nature, to give them another plug, they've got resources that can help you identify who your customer is and how your customer buys your product. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. Where if you go to a broker they're so busy doing what, working on 100 different projects that they're not focused on just your brand. And again, back to the Turnkey Sales Story Strategies course, your ability to leverage your selling story across every aspect of your sales funnel is your greatest strength. And I guarantee that that will help you more in terms of growing and scaling your brand than literally anything you can do. But yet most brands don't have the discipline to do that. So thank you for sharing that, Adam. So as we're talking about right now with the pandemic, the reason this matters so much is because unfortunately, a lot of brands are laying off people. And this complicates the story even more. So let's say that as a brand, I've hired Adam and I've spent months looking to find him. He's the perfect candidate. I've invested in him. I've groomed him. And now he's taking a lot of excess stuff off my plate. So I have more bandwidth to grow my brand, which is why I'm here, right? But now all of a sudden the pandemic hits and I got to make some tough decisions. Do I fire Adam? Because if I do, then I have to start all over again. And I need to take on his work for him. And so this is an opportunity for us to lean in. One, two, we have insights because of our experience as to what else is working in the world. And so before you decide that we're going to fire Adam, sorry, Adam, didn't know you're going to get fired today. But before we decide to fire Adam, we could bring in an expert like Adam to help us identify other strategies, go-to-market strategies, et cetera, help us tighten our belt where it makes sense. For example, trade marketing, help us get into the right stores instead of stores that are clear across the country that we can't support, et cetera. So think about the other ways that having that level of expertise to come in and look at your business to assess and guide you to be successful so that you don't have to fire Adam, start completely over again. Adam, your thoughts now that you're back on the payroll?
Thank you. That was, the quickest turnaround ever. So, yeah, I think the immediate thing that comes to mind right now, Dan, the probably the biggest pandemic-related change to our industry, I think, is just the immediate omnichannel necessity that's come out. And so you look at, direct to consumer and e-com, and this is no secret, everyone's been talking about it. But I think what's been interesting to me is even just, 6 months ago, especially a couple of years ago, the idea that you could be a specialist in the retail silo, and then you had someone else to do e-com and someone else that could do food service. And that still exists as you get to a scale where that makes sense to have those silos of your sales structure. Certainly that's the optimal way to operate. But now the idea for startup brands, I think looking at direct to consumer, e-com, first party website first, retail second, suddenly the idea of being a specialist in these, specific silos and channels, when you're emerging, when you're small and trying to be nimble and look at where can I capture sales, the most immediate fashion, the whole world's been turned upside down in the last few months. And again, there's been a ton of content and discussion about this topic, but I think the other stipulation here then becomes, okay, is an owner founder going to be the one that figures out e-com or who to work with and what kind of digital consultancy to work with? And do I do Amazon? Do I try to figure it out myself? Do I want to give Amazon all my consumer insights? How do I even start to use Shopify for my first party? All those things really become, I think, pretty daunting quickly. And again, I would never sell myself as saying, hey, I'm your one-stop e-com solution, but at least there could be potentials for saying, here's who we need to work with. We can outsource portions of this, and we can also try to find solutions to have a tandem e-com, direct-to-consumer, and retail strategy. And, oh, by the way, if you were thinking about doing food service a few months ago, we should probably put food service on the back burner because the channels, in some ways, very much diminished to almost non-existent right now. So let's look at that in 2021. So I think prioritizing where you're placing your bets, short term, middle term, long term, looking at how you're investing against the most immediate return on where the revenue can come from. You're talking a lot about the data and the insights. And I think if we look at even, store traffic and what's happening with the grab and go coolers, with consumers going in and buying less in the perimeter of the store, where a lot of the grab and go deli consumption is happening in the chilled beverage space. Those are all having very, very real impacts. So I think needing to look at what's the expectation on units per store per week. Maybe you used to be able to do 4 or 5 units per store per week. Maybe in a cold case deli cooler, it was even higher than that for fast turning items. Now, taking back those expectations and looking at how can direct to consumer fill in some of that gap. So a lot of these things, which it's almost daunting to think now of just the speed at which we're trying to make these decisions and look at how the whole pie kind of constantly gets reshuffled.
Yeah, and that's something definitely to think about, especially now. Unfortunately, I've been hearing a lot of these. Well, let's back up. First, one of the greatest opportunities I think we had in natural is to help retailers fill those holes that the big companies were leaving.
Yeah.
Well, now that the retailers are on their sugar high again, unfortunately, and they're looking at trade marketing as a profit center, which they always have. Now they're looking to those big companies to get the slotting dollars because it's a profit center to them. And what they're doing, unfortunately, is they're focused on their bottom line and they're looking at the short-term gain from that. What does that mean? In terms of what Adam was talking about, if you don't have the velocity that a store expects you don't have velocity within a store, the chance of you getting delisted is pretty great. So now you need a compelling story to help that retailer understand why you need to be on the shelf. So as I'm always talking about, instead of focusing on velocity, because there's no way you're going to compete head to head on velocity alone. Instead of that, let's talk about contribution. So what is contribution? Contribution is the profitable dollars you drive into the store. It's what they take to the bank. So I've got examples actually in that trade marketing course, that the one that's free. But the reason I mention that is that when you're thinking about how your brand performs within a retailer, think about how you're doing more to drive traffic in the store, how you're doing more to give them a competitive advantage in your market, and you're helping them gain a reasonable profit in the category. I see Dave's on the call too. Dave and I were having a conversation before. By the way, if you want to reach out to us and have an individual conversation, like I said, please do. But we were talking about, for example, with his brand, and I certainly don't want to embarrass anyone, but what we're talking about is how he's struggling to try to get mainstream retailers to understand the benefit of his customer. And this is exactly what we're talking about. And the reason this matters is because his brand drives more profit into the store than other brands, legacy brand, et cetera. But reason I wanted to highlight that is because as you're thinking about your go-to-market strategy, sometimes being able to bounce an idea off of someone like us might give you some additional bandwidth, might give you a way to move the brand forward, et cetera. And more importantly, give you or help you develop that argument as to why your brand is more valuable to the retailer. And Dave's been on every one of these webinars. Thanks, Dave. But we've talked about this in depth about how to leverage, for example, your contribution in lieu of slotting, in lieu of all that other stuff. Because at the end of the day, if we can help the retailer grow and scale and survive, that's what they really want. So the sugar high eventually will wear off. Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the idea of, incrementality for the category and ultimately looking at it through a buyer's eyes in terms of how they're judged on their, category management and, how are they oftentimes being incentivized and making more money, at the end of the year. So bringing growth to the category. So, points of difference, what's incremental, looking at where there is, bloated category entries, if you have, 5 to 10 sometimes different competing brands with very similar propositions. Are those all bringing incrementality? Are they all still, operating at the same threshold they were a couple of years ago? I think so much we're seeing, especially in beverage where I've spent a lot of my career, the idea that, the retailer just kind of sits back and hits autopilot and cruise control and says, well, wait a second, this category is still cranking along. You know, you can look at the energy category, for example, and it's easy to justify saying, I think I still need 12 to 15 SKUs of this brand. Well, a lot of times it's, to your point, Dan, because they're getting so many dollars and so much other kind of support and almost, kind of blackmail type leverage from these big guys. But if you really had, a clear, transparent lens on the business, you would say, well, I think that there's a lot of shelf space here in real estate for more incremental ideas. The consumer is now ready for things that are offering a more fresh perspective on the category. And depending on the retailer, their location, the buyer's mindset, and then how much they're data driven, they may see that, even though the kind of tried and true legacy brands might still be driving 75 to 90% of the category. Where's the growth coming from? And if the growth percentage on those is stagnant to declining, which oftentimes it is, it really would behoove them, at least in the longer term, to say, okay, I think that 10 to 25% of the category is what's driving the growth. So if you start to look 1, 2, 3 years down the road at the category, that's going to be a much bigger percentage of where the growth is going to occur. So a lot of this really goes to, how much is the buyer focused on today versus setting themselves up for success down the road. And I think that gets into also how brands can speak to these suppliers, how you present data, how you present the trend story in terms of what consumers want. And it varies, depending on the geography and on the type of channel and the type of buyer. So a lot to unpackage there, but I think it's fascinating in that you need to really consider the audience and try to customize the package, the presentation towards that buyer. And I would also add that I think having a compelling brand story right now is just so critical. I think a lot of brands are wondering, how do you get a response right now? When do I send samples? If they're unsolicited, is that actually going to be a negative thing for me? How do I get their attention? So I think, having unique selling points that are relevant, whether it's, your functional benefit, your origin story, the sustainability story of the brand, or, the convenience, all these propositions that need to stand out right now. And I think the idea of kind of periodic check-ins, looking at sending sales decks, just very short or 90-second YouTube videos that can resonate, and just periodically check in and say, no pressure, but I just wanted to kind of stay top of mind with you, let you know, here's what we're working on behind the scenes. And, when you come up for air and start to have conversations, I look forward to continuing the conversation. And I think that's the best in class approach, for what's happening in the retail world right now.
Absolutely. And let me go one step further. This is your opportunity to prove yourself as a valued resource, as a valued, trusted, and respected resource. So from my perspective, a category leader is any brand willing and able to step up and help guide their retail partner to succeed. And that's different from a category captain. I've been that before, and that's really expensive. And that's something none of these brands, none of the brands in this channel I would recommend. But brands that have big resources like a Unilever or Kimberly-Clark, of course, they can afford that. But absolutely. And so when you're thinking about helping them see the future, a quick example, several years ago, working for Unilever, P&G bought Gillette, and they came up with their own body wash, and the product was tanking. And I got it discontinued off the largest retailer in the country's stores on their shelves. And it deserved to be discontinued. And P&G walked in with a big check and bought that space back. Okay, now while this happened, other retailers were losing with that products being discontinued at all the competitors' retailers too, competitor stores. And what happened was competitors, their category, the body wash category, their sales were up. Well, because we had Gillette body wash on the shelf and it wasn't doing well, that retailer did not do as well as their competition. They lost a lot of share. So helping them see around the corner and their blind spots, that's really, really important. I interviewed Patagonia yesterday, and they're going to be coming on the podcast. They might even be doing one of the free webinars on a panel, fingers crossed. But anyhow, the reason I mentioned them is they are the best at developing a story around their brand and executing around that and helping brands understand it. So anyhow, definitely be looking for that. It'll be in a couple of weeks. But as Adam said, your brand story is it is your lifeline. It is everything about your brand. Think about everything when a customer goes to a store and they see your name on a brand, that is your brand, right? And if there's an out of stock, it's not the broker's fault. It's not the distributor's fault. It's not the retailer's fault. It's your brand because it's got your name on it. So how does that impact their view of your product? And you've got to put your best foot forward every single time you go to market. So as Adam was saying, this is why this is so important. You need to you've got to have the strategies in place so that you're effectively managing or executing your business strategy, your retail strategy. So Adam, what would you recommend a brand do to capitalize on what we've been talking about so that they're executing flawlessly at shelf?
Yeah, I think depending on the stage and scale of the brand, there would be a couple different probably, priority solutions there. I would say if you're just getting going, the goal is to get distribution. You have to get on the shelf. Figuring out, as we've been talking about, the most efficient way to do that, whether it's, internally or having external support, looking at, the opportunity to at least find experts that you can consult with, folks who are in your network, folks that you can connect with through industry sources like this, is definitely important to get going. Once you have some distribution, once you have some placements and warehouses open, and you need to go, as the old merchandising cliche goes, inspect what you expect. Typically, it makes sense to look at third-party merchandising groups or even, other ways of crowdsourcing things. There's a lot of technology out there now, which can even optimize, again, extending the resources you have outside of your small team. I would not advise a, $5 million or smaller brand, even maybe larger than that, to go out and hire 10 merchandising area sales reps across the country. That's a massive, massive resource load on payroll and other things that we discussed earlier. So how do you most efficiently do that on kind of a real-time, as-needed basis? And there are these tools now that enable that, whether it's third-party merchandising groups, the crowdsourced auditing tools, things like that. So enabling tech to be an asset if the brokers are not able to do it, and constantly looking at, hey, if I just have a need to check certain stores to do it with a certain cadence, there might be some tools and ways to really optimize that. And that's, again, where it really helps to find folks who can advise you in these areas, as opposed to just going down the rabbit hole yourself and feeling like it's so overwhelming.
And thank you for sharing that. On that note, last summer, more so than other times, it's kind of ebbs and flows, but last summer, a bunch of big legacy brands reached out to me and asked me, how do you maximize your broker effectiveness? And I've actually put a course on my website that has a lot of those insights that I shared with him. But the point is exactly what Adam was talking about. How do you choose the right broker? How do you hold them accountable? How do you get them to execute at the level that you expect them to? In fact, I was talking to Madeline Hayden on one of the podcast episodes. She's with NutPods. And she asked, her bottleneck that she shared was, how do I manage my broker? And I said, well, if I'm working for you and I'm not performing, kind of like Adam was a minute ago, then you'd fire me, right? And I said, well, then why don't you hold your broker to the same level? Why don't you hold them accountable to the same way that you would hold me? And one other thought that back to what Adam said a minute ago, I keep talking about this. You've got to have your brand available anywhere your customer shops, and that includes online. And Adam has alluded to this a couple times. That's a great point. You've got to have a digital strategy. You've got to be everywhere. So there are creative strategies that I share throughout, on the podcast, et cetera, and about how to leverage your trade marketing, how to leverage your go-to-market strategy with online. So for example, you could actually, and I haven't seen people do this and do this well, but this is one of the things that I'm working with brands on, leverage their online strategy to drive sales in a brick and mortar store and vice versa. and it's all about being discovered. Again, social nature, that's kind of one of the things that they do. So the point is reaching out to people in the industry that can help you develop these kind of strategies that are creative, that are different, that are things that other people, your peers, et cetera, aren't aware of, that you're not going to hear of at the business schools and et cetera in this industry. That's why we're having this conversation, because we want to teach you how to avoid those bottlenecks in the first place. And we want to give you strategies, insights, et cetera, to help you really grow and scale and get beyond that. I know that we've got 13 more minutes. Adam, why don't we take a quick break and you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing and how we can get a hold of you and what you do specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, the business name is Summit Sales Consulting. My website is summitsalesconsulting.com. And then I live in Southern California. I also can be reached on my website with my phone number and contact information there if you send an inquiry or via LinkedIn, either my personal page at Adam Hertel or Summit Sales Consulting. So yeah, right now I'm working with a few early stage emerging brands, focusing on kind of a little bit different, more advising kind of channel strategy setting and looking at getting the foundational work done for one of them. The other one very much in a outsourced sales capacity, really managing and directing the regional focus of getting into the retail environment as well as direct to consumer right now. So again, it really can run the gamut depending on the brand needs and what kind of either very short term initial 1 month type engagement versus going into a longer engagement where they're seeking for a solution that could be to really scale things up over a 12 to 18 month type time frame. So yeah, encourage anyone to reach out. Definitely would love to continue conversations and talk about all these sort of things. I think the idea in general here is, I think cultural fit with your partners is also very critical. Just making sure it feels right. You need to enjoy who you work with. At the end of the day, it is a people business, and that really drives a lot of it. You need to enjoy who you're working with, whether it's brokers and direct to consumer partners. There's enough grief and headaches with getting distribution and getting on the shelf in terms of some of the things that always aren't so pleasant. So I would really advise to just interview a lot of people, talk to different folks like you and I, and just see what feels right, see what's a good fit for where the brand exists and what your needs are now and in the future. And it's a pretty close-knit industry that way. A lot of people are really willing to reach out and help, have resources like you're providing here, Dan. I think in general, looking at just how collectively, how can this industry pull through this time, this challenge right now, and put our best foot forward. And I also see that retailers are starting to take a different approach. I've actually noticed in the last week or so, just coming out of the 4th of July holiday break, that perhaps this roller coaster pandemic in the second half of the year, there might have been a kind of a hesitancy for retailers to come out of the bubble in the shell, so to speak, hoping this was going to pass by midsummer and then everyone would be back in their offices and we'd have face-to-face meetings and it would be business as usual. And even I think in April and May, we were expecting that maybe it would look different by July and August. We're now seeing that this is probably going to continue for the majority of the second half of the year and hopefully not too much further into next year. But I think the retailers now are realizing they have to pivot, and that means that we need to get some things done and not just hit pause for the rest of 2020. So I'm optimistic. I really feel like people are pulling through this together, and now they're trying to find ways to see the light and move forward.
Thank you for sharing that. And on that note, the best defense against any virus is a healthy diet. And so that's why you matter. And by the way, Adam's information is, his email address is in the chat. On that note, please put something in the chat if you've got a question. Another thing that's really great about hiring someone fractionally is if you've got something that you're trying to do and you just need a little bit of help, hey, we can jump in there and do that for you and help you get that done real quick and efficiently, and then let you go back to whatever you're doing until you need us again. So there are a lot of ways to use fractional experts to help you grow and scale your brand. It's not a matter of you're married to that person for life, et cetera. But it's, more importantly, it is a way to really grow and scale. And the other cool thing is, like I said, you get that super high level expertise that you honestly wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. And so, take advantage of that. And so let's keep talking. We've got, like I said, if anyone's got a question, I got a couple questions from before. So Janice asked, is this going to be recorded? Yes, this is. So this will be available later. Because this is valuable and this is timely, I'm going to strip off the audio, put it on the podcast in a couple of weeks. In addition to that, I am going to make this video will be available. I'll probably put it on the YouTube channel or maybe in a course. We'll talk about it. But by the way, on the courses, there are a lot of other free courses out there that are collaborations kind of like this with industry experts. And the reason this matters, again, this is free. Take advantage of that. That's why we do this. This is my way of giving back. Bringing someone like Adam, an expert like Adam, onto this platform and helping me help you solve your bottlenecks and answer your questions and grow and scale. Tom has a question for Adam. Wants to know about your beverage experience. So in terms of your beverage experience, he wants to know, how does your experience working with a multinational brand work? See if I understand this correctly. How does that impact the way that you're able to work in natural, those strategies versus mainstream? And then how do you leverage that as a fractional or part-time employee?
Yeah, the multi-part question. I think historically the natural side has been more relationship-based selling. It's more about the feel-good emotional connection of the brand, and that was true largely. I would say, in the 2000s and maybe up until a few years ago. What we've seen emerge now is the data-based factual selling has really crept in from the conventional side as spins and other syndicated data sources are now in the natural specialty channel. So just to have a friendly face and go in there and be old pals with somebody is not enough the way it used to be in some cases. I think the brand proposition needs to still resonate in the natural channel in such a way that there's got to be kind of that triple bottom line in terms of being good for the planet, still being profitable, offering incrementality, but having a story that's also authentic and really is driving at something that those consumers are going to emotionally resonate with. So Whole Foods has changed a lot. There's no question that Amazon has changed the dynamic and the personality somewhat of Whole Foods, but it's still very important to be a brand that resonates with the Whole Foods team and why you would go on the shelf there. That's a different set of criteria than what it's going to be to get on the shelf at Publix, no question. So I think the idea of looking at how you can appeal to both audiences, what are the triggers, what are the hot buttons in the presentations that those buyers want to see, whether it's a very organized kind of, structured presentation deck that you have to adhere to, or if there are other things that, you can appeal by showing them a quick video or, some feel-good message of how the brand is produced. I would say on the multinational level, working for, a large Japanese CPG, one of the challenges we had is looking at how to translate the story of how green tea and matcha is produced in the farm fields of Japan to a US consumer. It's a lot easier to tell that story when you can, take someone down the road to your local farm and talk about that. You can't take your consumer to Japan and say, here's what a beautiful tea field looks like, and look at how these amazing small family farmers harvest this tea and drop it off in their little Toyota pickup trucks in these burlap sacks. I mean, it's an amazing story, but you need to find those ways to connect that, to make the world feel smaller, and then to also look at the trends and say, we see that if we talk about these things more holistically and transparently, the US consumers are looking for that. They want to know where their food is being produced. They want to know the sourcing. We used to kind of say that this leaf to bottle story is kind of similar to saying the seed to cup or whatever, but really looking at trying to make the whole connection, the relationship feel more coherent and really honing in on making it a compelling, authentic story to the consumer. And that's a lot tougher for a large multinational company when the consumer in Japan just knows your brand because it's on every street corner in Tokyo, versus in the US where it's hard to even pronounce your company's name because people don't speak Japanese. So it's very humbling, but it's also kind of a long game in the Eat One example to look at having 3 different brands, and then how did each of those brands resonate in different channels for different consumers, and knowing when to apply each one of those and where to place your resources, given where you think those brands are going to have runway in the U.S. market.
I'd like to add, thank you for the question, by the way. I'd like to add that also generic presentations that a lot of brands use today, unfortunately, are woefully inadequate.
Yeah.
And having the right kind of insights, you've mentioned different databases. There are different databases that work with different retailers, and you've got to know which one's which and which one makes the most sense. You just can't walk in with one database and think that that's going to apply to every other retailer. And unfortunately, I think as an industry, we don't do a good job educating people about that. But also the other kind of insights that you're bringing in, how does that work? And then, as Adam has talked about several times, your compelling story. It's got to be able to resonate through your sales deck. The way that when I started, a lot of the retailers, you would present to the retail buyer, they would then present to their procurement office, and then they would have a meeting amongst themselves where they would represent the product to their team. And so you had to make sure that your deck had everything in it, so that when you left it behind, you absolutely knew that there would not be any questions that would get you, that they would have where they would basically say no to your product. And those are some of the insights and the watch outs and the things you need to be aware of that people like us can help you with. So again, with a cultural fit, that gives you even more insights. And so with that, tell you what, we've got one more question. So with this, Adam, with the retail investment dollars adding up, when should you add fractional help?
Yeah, there's not a cut and dry answer for that. I would say, looking at how long the owner, founder, initial team can keep their arms around the expanding business. There's a lot of criteria that would dictate that decision in terms of where's your distribution. Does it require store level support? Is it all being done at the headquarters, centralized corporate level? And then looking at, how is the pull through? Getting an initial idea of the proof of concept. Is it starting to pull through off the shelf? Are you seeing that, wow, we've got something here, and maybe you're in a couple of regional retailers and you've been in for 3 to 6 months, and you're getting a little bit of a sales story coming back to you, and you're talking to the retail buyers, they seem happy with it, and you might finally kind of have a little bit of a light bulb moment, like, hey, I think we're onto something here. Although I don't feel very confident knowing that I can manage it or set promotional calendars going forward, or how do I work with UNFI and KE to open up new warehouses, and this is starting to become like a foreign language. Oh boy, I might need some help. So that's going to be different depending on the initial management ownership team and what their capacities and expertise is. But I would say, somewhere in that first probably 6 to 18 month time frame, as some of that distribution occurs, start to look at these decisions. And even if it's only for, saying, hey, I need someone to help me for a month or two to figure out a really good canned sales deck that I can tweak to figure out who a good broker could be if I want to try to manage them directly, get my pricing in line, look at maybe the label, understand if the product proposition is up to snuff. All these things, can be either temporary or ongoing. So again, just think about, does it start to feel like a scary unknown world that you're just not confident making decisions? Or do you still think that given the resources and the cash outlay, that you can continue to scale this for a little bit longer? But don't wait too long and make too many mistakes before you come back and say, oh, I wish I would have done this 6 months ago. Now there's some things that I can't really unwind easily, or there was some really poor money investments made. I wish I would have known better. And I think that's what you're alluding to, Dan, in terms of not to make those mistakes yourself and learning from other brands.
Thank you for saying, and then that's exactly why we're having this conversation. I know we're over, so we'll stop in just a second, but that's, Brad Barnhorn was on a few weeks ago, and that's essentially what he said. Use people like us to guide you, to help you think through some of these things so that we can help you make the very best decision. Adam, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate it. Thank you everyone for being here. I appreciate that. Really appreciate that because, you're the reason we do this, right? To raise the bar in the industry. And again, look forward to the next 2 webinars. I've got more scheduled down the road, coming up that I'm working on. But again, let us know what your bottlenecks are. Let us know what your challenges are and reach out to us. It's a free call, right? And we will try to answer some of your questions, and we will try to do our best to help steer you in the right direction, even if it's not us as the best possible resource. That's what makes natural natural. So we're all here helping each other. So Adam, any parting thoughts?
No, I just want to again thank you, Dan, for having this forum for the industry and for continuously having this content out there. It's a real service to everyone, and I think especially in these times right now, all the unique angles that you're covering with this content is very valuable and needed. So I appreciate the opportunity. It's been great.
Thank you. Well, and I appreciate it. And again, thanks everyone. This is why we do this for you, right? This is about you and it's for you. So thank you so much. So anyhow, look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks.
Great.